Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome to episode 2 of Maker's Mic, a music makers podcast presented by LR Bags. I am super excited about today's guest. Not only is he just a good-hearted dude and easy to talk to, but he also happens to be an incredible musician. In fact, he's the guy responsible for the music you're hearing right now. Let's call it our intro music. It was recorded in the summer of 2015 when the very talented Mr. Charlie Worsham stopped by the LR Bags loft to demonstrate his acoustic setup. Back in April of 2017, Charlie released his second full-length studio album titled Beginning of Things. And if you haven't done it yet, you gotta do yourself a favor and check it out. Today, Charlie was kind enough to stop by our office here at Soundcheck in Nashville, Tennessee, with his sweetheart of a dog, Peggy Sue. We laid a nice soft blanket on the couch for Peggy Sue to sleep on, but instead she spent most of her time just sniffing around, staying just as busy as Charlie does. It's funny, man. I had this dream last night that, I do things like this and I think about them so much. And so I had this dream last night that I just found out that you were a left-handed guitar player.
Oh.
I know it's not true.
Yeah.
But in the dream, I was like, oh, man, Charlie's a left-handed guitar player. I got to ask him about that tomorrow. And then I got up this morning and I was like, wait, is Charlie a left-handed? I don't think he is. And I had to go and look at a video and I was like, oh, no, he plays right-handed. Okay.
That's crazy. I am left-handed, though.
Are you?
Which is crazy, yeah. And I mean, not that I have any athletic potential, but from doing t-ball and whatnot and messing around on the golf course, I swing a golf club like a right-handed player, and I swing a baseball bat and throw and catch like a left-handed. I don't get it. I write left-handed.
So that would make you somewhat ambidextrous?
Well, it's whatever the impaired version of that is.
Yeah.
Like, I'm so bad at sports that I can only hope to even pretend to look like I know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
On one, whichever one, but yeah, musically it just always made sense to play right-handed.
Yeah.
I don't know. But
just felt more natural that way?
Yeah, I played piano first, and I don't know if there is something to do with that. If it's, you would think, because I've thought about this a lot, because in piano I always felt, your left hand is naturally powerful with those low notes.
Right.
And your right hand is naturally the one that you want to be more fluid. Of course, and y'all talk about piano players wanting to work on their left hand, being more fluid and all of that. But so you would think if I grabbed an instrument that I would take my left hand and do this. But I think it might be that, playing banjo, the right hand you actually need all the, not arm-wise, but finger-wise, you need your dexterity there. Because the left hand, there's not much. You just kind of clamping here and there. Maybe there's something to do with that. I don't know.
Huh.
Or maybe I'm just lucky that nobody handed me a left-handed guitar.
Yeah.
I mean, God, that would break my heart these days. Like going into Gruins and there's nothing you can play.
Right. Yeah. All right. Let's roll into this thing.
Yeah, man.
I wanted to just kind of start with your upbringing.
Yeah.
And, so you were born in Mississippi.
Born and raised in Mississippi.
And what kind of brought you to music?
My first memory of music was seeing my dad play drums in a local band, a cover band. And he made his career as a banker, but he was in probably senior year of high school when the Beatles came to America.
Okay.
And he had the bug. He grew up when all that great music was going on, and it extended into the 70s, into his college years and his young adult life. And he was always a musician growing up as well. He was the kid that got the Ringo Starr kit for Christmas, and that was just his thing. And so through my early childhood, he still played a gig here and there on the weekends, and I remember getting to go with him. And I think that's where I got the bug. I just remember they were at sound check, and I got to sit in his lap and hit the drumstick on the drums and hear it through the speakers, and it just was this powerful thing. And later that night, they were actually playing an Episcopal convention, and they pushed the altar and all the religious stuff out of the way and had a dance party at the end of and I remember the guitar player in the band sang Werewolves of London and played the guitar solo with his teeth, and I just thought, my God, these are grown men, and look at what they're turning. This whole room will do anything for them to keep playing.
Right.
This is the greatest thing ever. I got to do this.
Grown
and I don't,
men by day, werewolves by night.
Exactly.
Almost.
And I never got a message from the world saying that it wasn't a possibility. Because I don't remember, people have asked me if I ever remember that, what was the moment when I decided to do this for a living. It wasn't that I had that moment. I just never had the moment that it couldn't be. It was always my first choice, and nobody ever said no. So here I am. Yeah.
That's a cool. That's the best way I've ever heard anyone come, into that life.
I owe my parents that. They always supported it. They never pushed me, but they encouraged me and found a way to support it. So that really was everything.
Yeah.
Having that.
Yeah. And then, so were you in bands in high school and stuff?
Oh, man, yeah, I was always trying to get bands together. And I would always get frustrated because to the other guys, it was cool for about an hour. And then, let's go play video games or order pizza or watch a movie or something. Or, God forbid, let's go do some sports activity. Because I was thinking, well, no, we're just getting started. You guys got to understand, like, this is going to be hard work. But then we're going to play this gig. Because in my mind, I had that memory of the Episcopal folks just getting crazy. And so about middle school, I did have a group of guys who really, we played a handful of gigs. And then in high school, about 8th grade on, I joined a band with grown men, and they were all in their 30s and 40s and had families, but they took it seriously to the point that they booked regular gigs. And that's when I really began my education in terms of playing in clubs and all of that.
Did you play with your dad at all? Or?
We would jam at the house all the time.
Uh-huh.
We, as a matter of fact, they ended up building a little guest house in back because my mom was on the phone one day. My dad and I were jamming and making so much noise that she had to get to the other end of the house. My room was upstairs, and she had to go to the other end of the house downstairs. And it was like that Jurassic Park movie. She was hiding in the corner of the bathroom to be able to hear this person on the phone, and the water was doing that thing that the water did when the T-Rex would stomp in Jurassic Park. And then later that year, they discovered a crack in the sheetrock in the dining room wall under my room from all of the drumming. So they sent me out into the backyard, and that became the studio. Pretty crazy.
That's awesome, man. And so you went to Berklee, right?
That's right.
I've noticed Nashville actually has quite a big influx of Berklee kids.
Yeah. There's a cool little presence. And there were a good 3 or 4 dozen of us within a 18-month period who moved to Nashville at the same time. And it was a blessing because I think for a lot of people who do something as crazy as move to a city like Nashville to pursue a dream, they're going in alone and they don't know anybody. They're going cold. And we all had each other. Yeah. And so we might not be getting great gig opportunities, but if someone got a halfway decent one, or even one that wasn't great but that paid the rent that month, and they needed a drummer and a bass player for it, or they needed an engineer or whatever, we could call each other. Right. So we all lifted one another up, and that still happens today. Fortunately, the gigs have gotten better and more consistent and all of that.
Yeah. When you moved here, what was sort of your first steps into like okay, I'm out of school, I moved to Music City.
Yeah.
What's next?
I was really fortunate in that before I moved here, I was visiting pretty regularly. And Berklee, one of the great things they do is their spring break, they go to Nashville, and they bring about 150 students each year. And so I was already planting seeds a year or two ahead of time, and I ran into a friend that I randomly jammed with once at the agriculture center in Mississippi, the sort of ag museum. Randomly, he was a friend of a friend, and I was with a friend of a friend, kind of thing, and we ended up at the benefit show in Memphis together, and we're like, "Oh my God, that's you!" Turns out they were in a band that a guy in Nashville was producing, and then I got to know them, and then every time I was in Nashville, every couple months, while still going to Berklee, I would reach out and get coffee, whatever, go jam. And they took me under their wing, brought me into the fold. And so when I did pull the trigger and move here, I'd accidentally become a member of the band. They had had a member leave and go to Los Angeles to pursue a different music opportunity, and I'd been subbing a gig or two for the guy and got the invite to join the band. So next thing I know, I'm moving to Nashville, and I've already got a gig. And the band had a pub deal, they had gigs, and so I was thrown in to a situation where I could write with people, learn from them, play gigs, learn from them. And they also we lived in a house together. Most of the band was all in one house, and so I got in some really good cheap rent too.
Yeah, yeah. So it was just like endless creativity and
it was a music house. Every night there'd be a jam session, and it's actually a lot of people like Casey Musgraves came through that house and jammed some. Later, after I'd left the band, some folks were still in the house, and I think Maren Morris spent some time jamming and singing there. Richard Marks one random night had played a show with our band. The band was King Billy, and of course across the street lived John and T.J. Osborne.
Yeah.
And the brothers Osborne now, and John and I were in the band together, and Cree Harris and Misa Arriaga, who's a great dude on the scene here, and tons of songwriters and all of that, and so it was a really cool thing to be a part of. We didn't know it at the time, but looking back, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think too, you just need that. I mean, moving here, you got to have a little bit of that spirit of like. There's a great old Tom T. Hall book that he called The Storyteller's Nashville, and he talks about the morning he drove into Nashville, and he looks at the skyline after walking out of a diner, getting his breakfast, and he's getting ready to go to Nashville, and he just looks at the skyline and he says, "Hope you're ready for me, you son of a bitch." And you got to have a little bit of that attitude.
Yeah.
But it's nice when once you get here, there's something that happens that encourages it, not discourages it, because it can break you, I think. And so it was nice to have those first 3 years in town. We were all for one, one for all. We traveled the country a few times in a passenger van, and we just knew that we were going to be bigger than Elvis. And even though the band, as it was, didn't break that way, it was that feeling and being a part of it that kept us going, and being buddies and seeing each other still in it and doing great things. It was just a great thing. Whereas it could have been that sort of thing where the first 50 doors I walked to were slammed in my face, and they weren't.
Right.
And that was a really wonderful gift.
Yeah. And then so where does the story of Charlie Worsham solo artist?
Whew, man. Well, that band breakup was the hardest of my life.
Was it really?
I mean, harder than a relationship, really, because it was
what happened?
And a long story short, we had a deal that was up, and it was time to sign a new deal, and I was odd man out in terms of wanting to sign or not, and I didn't, and unfortunately that meant to be in the band, we all had to be in the deal, and I just didn't feel like it was what I wanted and what was best for me, and it happened quick, and my mom, who was teaching up here at the time, she's a brilliant woman, and she has spent some time doing gifted programs here in the Nashville schools, and she had a condo down off of Nolensville Road near where it intersects with White Bridge or whatever, and so in the course of a weekend I moved out and moved in with my mom, and that was a little that was not fun.
Humbling?
Oh, to say the least.
Yeah.
But the great thing about it, and this pattern continues today in other ways, but that thing that you think was the one thing you couldn't afford to lose or have it change or go away happens, and then you realize it's not the end and you can keep going, and in fact they become these blessings. And the blessing was I met a guy named Arturo Guinahora, and he had been at Sony Publishing, at Universal South. He spent some time at Capitol, both in publishing and in the A&R world, and he was getting back into publishing, and he was getting ready to work with Olay publishing company, and he signed me to a pub deal, and I had to bridge the gap for about 6 months, but I knew I was going towards a new pub home, and he was helping me work on my thing, my solo thing, and that was an awakening for me to sort of. I'd always wanted to be the front man, and then I joined this band, and well, we don't need a front man, we need an acoustic harmony guy. And it's like, well, okay, cool, let's do it. But then being out of the band and meeting someone like Arthur sparked that thing again that I had all along to do solo. And I had to pay the bills playing sessions and playing for other people on the road. And that had its own really fun element too. And I'm grateful I have those tools in my toolkit to get me through times like that. And so 6 months later, I was writing at a publishing company with the intention of getting a record deal and making a record. And that eventually happened.
Yeah, with Rubber Band.
Yeah.
And and so when that album came out, you went on some pretty big tours, right? With some...
I did. Yeah, and actually the first of those tours was Taylor Swift, and it was before I had the record deal. We had started making what became the record, but being on that tour, she probably doesn't know this, but if you're listening, Taylor, you helped me get a record deal. Thank you.
Please listen, Taylor.
Yes, please do. And for LR Bags, just retweet would be huge.
Be great.
For all of us. Anyway, it was great. It was great to go out and be on this tour that was 14 buses and 24 semis and see how that all works.
Yeah. And
to see a fan base that had been built that was so loyal and so fired up to be there. And then a few others called and had me open for them. And Miranda Lambert was incredibly gracious to do that. And everybody I've been on the road with, I've learned something from, and I'm really fortunate. I've just had great touring, I'd say tour mates, but really tour hosts, people who brought me into their world and shared their audience with me.
Yeah. So I'm going to fast forward a bit here.
Okay.
We're talking about touring. Currently on tour with Brandy Clark.
Yeah.
How good is she? Right?
She's all right. She's incredible, man.
She's so amazing, man.
Her songwriting is just, and I get this sometimes because I'm definitely a picker and all, and people are like, man, you play guitar so great, blah blah blah, and then. But then eventually they might say something like, oh, and you sing good too, or you write, or whatever. And like that's the thing about Brandy is, like, she writes. If she couldn't sing a note, if she couldn't play a note, if she was a total like mean person, her songwriting alone is worth the price of admission.
Yeah, agreed.
And not just for her, but obviously she can write for others, and it's wonderful too, which is a rare gift. But on top of that, I think she's got an incredible voice that's completely underrated.
Yeah, absolutely.
And she plays great, and she is an absolute gem of a human being. I mean, that's been part of the fun of this tour is just hanging out between shows.
Yeah.
And she really has a beautiful fan base, too. I mean, we would play for audiences that had already bought both of our records, and they went and bought them back again on vinyl to give to a friend to turn them onto our music, and it's just cool to see someone who is so great that also inspires such cool and kind activity in her followers.
Yeah. I feel like the two of you on tour together makes perfect sense to me. I don't know her, but from what you've told me and from what I've read about her and heard, I have friends who know her, and you're like the nicest dude in the world, and it's just got to be like such a good environment that you guys are creating.
Yeah, we're birds of a feather, for sure. And I knew her from a distance before, and we collaborated on a few things here and there, but nothing crazy. And being on tour, I've gotten to know more about her story, and that makes it even more rich. Just she has been slugging away for so long at this, and she's been so good for so long, and that's got to be a hard thing to bear, but she bears it with grace.
Yeah. And
she just keeps creating and getting better and making more and great music. And so I really identify with her story, and you can hear it once you know her story. It makes her songs even better to hear, because then you realize, wow, this is not, yes, she pulls this from thin air, but not really. She pulls this from life.
Right.
And that's pretty incredible.
Yeah. Do you guys do any duets?
Yeah, we have a whole section of songs that made us want to write songs, just because we both love classic country music. And And so we'll take turns, and we pick fun themes every night, just at random. One night it'll be chest hair country. So I'll do a Conway Twitty song, and then she'll joke that, well, maybe she didn't have any hair on her chest, but this is definitely chesty country, and do a Dolly Parton song. And just back and forth, and we have a blast with
Kenny
it.
Rogers or something.
Little Kenny Rogers, exactly. And her mom came out to the show. She's from Washington State, and we played a show in Seattle, and the theme that night was songs Brandy Clark's Mama loves. It was cool.
Where do you feel like you fit in the landscape of country music?
I was hoping you could tell me. I love that question, and I had a lunch earlier today at Warner with a friend, and we were kind of talking about this. And in a lot of ways, it's the hardest, most challenging time for a guy like me in country. And at the same time, it's kind of the best of times, because everything is an unknown right now, and that, I think, gives me an advantage, but it does take some figuring out, and it's hard for me to answer the question straight on, because come next week I'm filling in for Vince Gill with the Time Jumpers, and I don't know how much countryer you can get to do something like that, but that doesn't have any bearing on how much I'm going to get played on radio.
Right.
And that's fine. That's not me complaining. That's just an observation. And the record I made in beginning of things, there are songs on there that are waltzes with upright bass and super duper as country as it gets, maybe too country. And then there are really out there things that probably don't have a place in our format at all.
Yeah. Maybe more like pop songs.
It could even be a pop thing or a rock thing or hot AC. But I think that country is equipped to take something more out there right now than they've ever been. They're more equipped for it than they've ever been. And so I think it's just a matter of time will tell, maybe, for me. And oddly enough, I may have to, for me, for this record, I've got a lot of good friends and really supportive folks at country radio. But they're not really playing this record, and I don't think they're gonna. And I can keep making records, and they can keep playing songs on the radio, and eventually we'll find something in which we can both share doing business.
Yeah.
I wish it could be this record. It probably won't be, but I kind of like the idea of maybe for a season or two I'm a country music expatriate. And if you look back, maybe I got to go find it somewhere else and bring it back to Nashville.
Right.
But that's just what's happening. If you see the Predators, you got hockey fans coming to Tennessee. What is up with that?
Yeah.
But it's awesome because it brings people into our world. And Taylor Swift, my first official tour mate, she brought so many people into the country fold, and she's not even in it any right now. She may come back. I hope she does sometime. But I just do, if you look at her and if you look at Brandy, I think all of my favorite artists, I've been in a Paul Simon phase right now, they defy being put in a single category. And so there's a part of me that wants to answer that question simply in one sentence and just be like, what are you talking about? Like I'm dead center in the crosshairs of what country music is, because there's truth in that. And yet maybe I don't even belong.
Right.
That all said and that all true, I'll sing you 40 different classic country songs in a row right now, and yet that doesn't necessarily mean country. I don't know. So maybe I got to go find it somewhere else. I know in the UK and Europe I've found a lot of great fans and made a connection, and maybe I build it there more. I'd love being over there.
Yeah.
But if it works, in the end it brings more people into our world, which is a good thing.
Yeah. The whole scene is changing. The whole genre is changing. There's so many different monikers for it. Everything's sort of blending and meshing and changing, and that's probably not even something you really think about, right?
I think
you just go out and make the music.
I think you're right. And then the people on my team, I think our job as a team, while I focus on that, working on music and my thing and creating more of it, I have a team that goes and tries to connect the dots between that and the people who are going to dig it. And the beauty of right now is that there isn't any rules, where I think there's been there have been rules in the past. If we decided we didn't want to go straight at country radio but try a different format, that would kill my chances in home base at country radio.
Yeah.
But that's not true right now. So it's a good thing for me. And I mean, I'm in a format that includes Margot Price, Jason Aldean, and everything in between.
Right. Yeah.
And it's all good. It's they're both selling tickets and records, and people are having more joy in their life for those records.
Yeah.
And it all somehow fits in the country, and what's wrong with that?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Can you talk a little bit about your process? I mean, everything from writing songs to lyrics and melody, which one comes first, and all the way to like assembling an album. Like, how do you whittle down what songs go on an album? Just
Right.
your whole process from creation of song to
Right.
creation of album. Or
Well, where it is right now, and I'm writing every spare minute I can right now, because on my first record with Rubber Band, I put it down, got busy, and by the time I picked it back up, it had been quite a minute, and I had to almost start over. So I'm keeping the creative fire burning, and you got to have an input side. On the album that just came out with Beginning of Things, a lot of the input was consciously not listening to what's going on right now.
yeah,
Not out of not liking it, but out of, I can't, if I borrow from the folks next door, it's going to be I need to borrow from a place that's deeper. And so I got into a big Jerry Reed and Roger Miller phase. I was reading a lot of books, and that's a pretty constant one for me, is to read great books.
uh-huh.
And some of my bluegrass roots, the Jimmy Martins, and also gave myself permission to indulge my love of the Beatles and the Stones and Led Zeppelin and all of that. So input is required.
Yeah.
And then for the last record, it was promising myself I'd fill up a page every morning. And the one rule was it had to be something true to what was on my heart. And that's been the big thing for me in the last few years, is my job is to find the truth that is particular to me and put it into song in a way that people can get their truth out of it.
Uh-huh. So like regimented journaling almost.
Yes. And I've stepped away from that right now because just time constraints, which is not an excuse, and I need to get back to it. The thing about those pages, they create fertilizer. And a lot of them are just crappy, useless stuff, but you're digging in the ground, you're getting your fertilizer going. It's shit.
Yeah.
But shit makes great fertilizer.
Right.
And if you get that out of the way, then you've already dug past that first layer, and you can really get into the good stuff after. And my blades are sharp doing it. You know, I'm in the habit of creating. And right now, though, if I were to do that, I would use it as a safety net, and I would never cross the threshold into actually writing songs. So now I'm just making myself write songs, and I'm going in cold, and I'm using intuition more than anything. And that means that maybe one day I'm messing with a loop pedal and coming up with a track live with my loop pedal, and some days it's straight up reading a book and trying to get song titles out of it, and then all points in between. The best songs, I feel like you've got a musical thing and a lyrical thing happening at once. It's kind of like lightning striking.
Yeah.
But it happens all kinds of ways, and I'm learning too that some songs just take a minute to be born. Some songs take a couple months or a year even before they are ready to pop. And then as far as making a record, I think you just got to call Frank Liddell, see what he thinks. No,
I mean, that is an important part of it, right? Having people and getting feedback. And
yeah, this last record with Beginning of Things, it was spending every 3 weeks or so an hour or 2 or 3 in Chris Lacey's office with her and Frank, and playing them songs I'd written from the notebook with a guitar. Didn't have tracks to play, I just had songs in my hand. And getting their feedback, writing more. They'd play me songs they'd found, and eventually we whittled it down. It was an alchemy, so to speak. And and the key that I loved, and maybe I won't always make records like this, but I remember thinking, wow, this is how you do it, was I wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote until I had enough songs for the whole record. that's when we went in the studio and cut a record.
Yeah.
And cutting the record became about myself and 3 other musicians developing a bond and a language together that created a common thread. Because as different as all the songs are on this record, it sounds like 4 dudes who holed up in a studio for 6 days. And it's not to say we didn't go in and do pre-production or whatever, just kind of to see where we were. But I think, Frank told me that making a record is taking a photograph of an artist at a point in time. And they don't have to be in a tuxedo and all of that, but you don't want to look hungover either. We need a good, honest portrait. And
right.
I think I've done that with the first 2 records I've made, and that's my goal for everything that comes next. And I feel like the nuts and bolts of how we make records, I mean, hopefully I don't make the same record twice. And I'm certainly currently in a Paul Simon phase, so that's going to influence the next phase. And one of the things that I love about him is he never made the same record twice. And my favorite folks in country music, Miranda Lambert and Eric Church, have never made the same record twice. Mm-hmm. And I think that's key too.
Yeah, there's an element of humor in a couple of your songs.
Yeah,
and you could say that about Paul Simon too. He had, you could tell he was having fun.
Yes.
Some musicians are just all serious and like heartache and but that's I don't really know where I was going with this, but
well, comedy is and I'm not just talking about the obvious 5th grade prankster comedy.
Yeah.
But smart comedy in music is important, and I think it accomplishes a couple things. I mean, I think that it tells the person who's listening to the music, hey, I'm not taking myself too seriously, so you have permission to do the same.
Yeah.
But I also think that comedy lets you keep your fangs out without worry of the venom. It sort of takes the venom away, and I think that's important. I think especially in a day and age like right now with so much craziness in the world, I think it's important to be able to speak to it. But you stand a much better chance of not turning people away if you start off by going, man, look at comedians. Where are we getting our news these days?
Right.
Comedians.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And
John Oliver and
that's right.
And Stephen Colbert and
that's right. Trevor Noah and
yeah.
those guys.
Yeah.
And something in the comedy lets you breathe a sigh of relief and really have a conversation about more heavy things.
Yeah.
Which I'm not saying I'd accomplish that on my record or anything. I just mean that's what I admire about comedy and art.
Yeah. Why is your second album called The Beginning of Things? Do you feel like it's are you restarting in any way, or is it?
Well, no. And I'm probably more proud of my first record now than I've ever been. Because without a lot of success, it still has managed to hold up. And it's still relevant, and it certainly was an accurate picture of me in my mid to late 20s.
Yeah. And
this record is an accurate picture of me now. I think we called it Beginning of Things for several reasons. I definitely hit a wall, been on the road too long, got burned out, and I had to stop and get back to the beginning of things. I had to fall back in love with music. It had to become that thing that it was when I was sitting in my dad's lap all over again.
Yeah.
Because somewhere along the way, it wasn't to be trusted, and it wasn't the fun thing that it had been, and that is a dangerous place to be. So I got back to that, and I think it was the beginning of me being a little bit more of a grown-ass man, not feeling like I had to please everybody else and make something. I mean, obviously it's working, but like make something the radio would want to play and make something that the label would feel confident about, all of that. I just kind of made it for me. Not that I didn't on the last one. I'm just saying I think I'm a people pleaser by nature, and I want to make sure everybody else is cool with what I'm doing, and so I'll ask permission for things. And Frank sort of tricked me into and taught me how to just not care, except for what really matters. And it was the beginning of that. And then there are these weird things that I love. Like cut outside songs for the first time, and I played piano on a track and dobro on another track that was a first for me. I mean, on the first record, there are no keyboards or anything like that because we sort of set out these rules for the record ahead of time.
Yeah.
It was the beginning of me trusting others, getting out of my comfort zone, and also trusting my own talent.
Yeah.
Being okay. I mean, and it's a weird thing to talk about, but I mean, guys like Vince Gill are my hero, and to be able to go play guitar for a guy like him on the road, I think I had to learn to be comfortable with being in that realm as a player and of that caliber.
Appreciate it at that level.
Appreciate it and not be cocky about it. And that would always be the fear. Is like, I don't mean to be cocky. It's just like I can be okay with being this type of musician, and that doesn't mean I'm being a dick about it or anything. You know?
Right. When we first met, you're a gear nerd.
Oh yeah.
When we first met, we were filming the thing with LR Bags, the hangout day with Lloyd.
Yeah.
Man, and you brought over your pedal board with all these rad pedals, and you had those Morgan amps.
Yeah.
And you were making just so many beautiful sounds come out of your acoustic guitar. And it's the source of our opening music for the podcast. I'd sent you that email asking you permission to use that piece that we had recorded that day. It's so cool, just that little kind of guitar chucking what is it about you that makes you such an experimental kind of sound seeker?
Well, I got to make a record here in Nashville, a bluegrass record, when I was 13 years old. And we made it in a guy's house. He had a 2-inch tape machine, and I remember this thing the size of an oven, and he would hit the button and it would spin, and it had a smell and a sound and a look about it and a feel, and the microphones and all of the cables running through the different rooms in the house, and I was fascinated by it. And when I did the thing at Berklee and was up in Boston, I picked the production and engineering major because our first time walking through as a family to tour Berklee and see what it was all about, my favorite part of the tour was the basement where they had these studios. And I was in high school, and here were kids a couple years older than me, and they had keys to these rooms with all these, I mean, it looked like the inside of the space shuttle. And I found out they had all night long after the classes were in the studios were done, you could rent the time, I mean, you could book time for practice in these studios. And so that became my major, not because of any reason other than I'm hooked on gear, and it was a way to get access to gear.
Yeah.
And I've always been fascinated by the art of recording and the fact that you can manipulate sounds the way you can, and it goes all the way back to loving the Beatles records and hearing how they evolved. Oh yeah. And the side of it with touring live, where I've become this sort of acoustic dude, but I play through amps. There are a couple of guys that influenced it. Jed Hughes, I remember seeing him do some shows, solo acoustic, and he ran his acoustic into a little amplifier, and it gave it this beautiful sound and sustain. And there's this band out of West Virginia, the Davison Brothers, and the Chris Davison, who plays the guitar, plays this crazy Allman Brothers slide, but it's amped, but it's through an acoustic instrument. And I thought, man, that's so cool. Like, who would ever plug an acoustic guitar through a tube screamer? Yeah. And then, fast forward, I'm in King Billy, and I'm sharing a monitor mix with a lap steel player who has a 50-watt amp behind us, and has got so much of himself in the wedge that we're sharing a mix for, that I thought, well, man, playing acoustic, I got to compete with volume. Yeah. So I started plugging my acoustic into amps, and the rest is history. It continues to evolve.
But tell us maybe a little bit about some of your favorite gear, and you don't even have to be like, if you want to talk about that George L pickup, feel free, man.
Okay.
This isn't like, exclusively us.
I got you.
Just talk about some of your favorite pedals, some of the ones you've been using, and maybe some of like the newer ones that you're really into now?
Yeah. Well, the current situation with I have a Martin M36 acoustic that I love. And it's only a few years old, but it's been played so much it sounds like it's 5 times that old, which I love. But
How long have you had that?
gosh, I got it probably 6 years ago.
Uh-huh.
I don't remember exactly when. But I love the guitar, and it's skinny like a triple O, but the top is more of the shape of a dreadnought, so it feels like a dreadnought, but it's not way out in front of you.
Yeah.
Which is great for touring.
Yeah.
And it's a good writing guitar too. And it actually, now that it's opened up, is a really good recording instrument. I'm very, very pro vintage acoustic instruments, especially, but vintage everything. But I say, for a new guitar, it records great because it's opened up. But so yeah, and I finally broke down and got them to drill a second input for that acoustic, and at the end it's got 2 separate input jacks, and of course what people hear as an acoustic from that is the LR Baggs Mini Anthem, and I love it. And I've flown all over from Australia to Europe on trains and all manner of travel with that instrument, and it's worked every time and sounded consistently great every time. And I'm a sucker for the Session DI. I have 2 pedal boards right now, and there's 2 or 3 pedals on each board that are the same, and the Session DI is number 1 on whatever I've got. And then the second input on that Martin, though, is this cheap, I don't think they even make them anymore, and you can find them on eBay for about $25, George L. pop-in pickup. And I got the guy at Jeff Marple at Corner Music to install it permanently into that second input jack. And that George L. is so crappy sounding that it feeds an amplifier beautifully, because it's just your mid-range. It's got no top end, no bottom end. It's just mids, and that is perfect for an amp.
Yeah.
And it's not bad about feeding back either, which is great. And so the pedals have come and gone, and if what I was doing were a simpler thing, I love nothing more than to play a gig with 1 or no pedals and just use my fingers and the volume control.
Yeah.
But for the acoustic thing, and especially when I'm being front man and I just need to be able to hit something and change gears, I use a few different pedals, and I love a lot of what the Exact Tone guys are doing. XTS, Barry O'Neill's company, and they make several pedals that I swear by. The Winford Drive is a must-have. That's one of the other pedals that's on every board for me. They also have a compressor that they're getting ready to launch that's insanely cool. And for telly pickers out there, the thing they have you can adjust the contour of that compression so that if you're wanting to spank out that low E string, it's not going to compress that at all.
Oh, yeah.
But then you're sliding up for a solo and doing the chicken picking thing on the 12th fret. It's heavily compressed and doing all that stuff you want it. But it doesn't squash your open chords.
Right.
And that's really cool. And it works great on the acoustic as well. And then they have another boost drive pedal that's pretty righteous too. They do a great mod on that old Boss EQ, which is just a great thing to have, especially if you're flying around, you got a backline gig, and you need to tweak an amp.
I feel like you see those quite a bit.
Yeah, but getting the mod from Exact Tone is worth it, because I learned from Session Guy years ago that it's multiples of 400 hertz. That's the sweet tone for an electric guitars. 400, 800, 1.2, all of that. And that's what they do at Exact Tone, is they switch those bands to be all your multiples of 400. And I love the stuff Strymon makes. The Brigadier delay is great, and the El Capistan is great. I don't think people like the Capistan because the tap is a little wonky, but you can set to a certain mode and don't use any wow and flutter, and it is accurate as it gets. It's just, to get all the cool tape warbly stuff they do, you sacrifice the tap tempo, but if you keep it clean and you stick to the one, I think they have A, B, and C mode, it's B mode. Anyway, you can figure it out, but there's a way to use it, and it's got accurate tap. And And then my most recent pedal that I love, and then I'll stop going on and on. But there's I forget even the name of it, a reverberator or something, but it's made by New Neighbor, Neunabor maybe.
Okay.
It's a stereo verb pedal, and it's incredible. It sounds so great. But
cool.
That's where I am with all that stuff right now.
I kind of figured you might go off and ramble a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I'm long-winded.
Yeah. I know something I wanted to ask you about. So you're a very creative and busy individual. Aside from writing songs, making albums, touring, you somehow take it a step further.
Okay.
I want to ask you about CMA Fest 2016.
Yeah.
And the Ernest Tubb Midnight Jamboree.
Yeah.
That you pretty much put that together, right? Like that was.
I did. I did. I mean, I had a lot of help, but
sure. But it was sort of your idea.
It was my baby, and
yeah.
And I spearheaded it, and it's a great lesson in. I got it tattooed on my arm, following your heart, because the number one goal was this. I remember going to the Ernest Tubb record shop when my family came to Nashville on family vacation when I was a kid, and the man there would give you a little unofficial tour of the place, and they'd point at the stage in the back, and they'd show you the little crate where Loretta Lynn stood because she was so short the crowd couldn't see her, and started talking about all the people that had played that stage. And then as an adult, I came back and I bought my first record there, and I just went and bought my second record there. In the last couple of years, I read the Ernest Tubb biography. And the thing about that building and that store and all it represents is he basically created the Ernest Tubb record shop because nobody bought country music records. They turned their noses up at our music. They didn't even call it country, they called it hillbilly music. And Ernest Tubb was aware that there were people out there who loved the music and wanted to buy it, but no record store would carry it because they were too good for us. And so he started the store, and they spent their first decade, basically mail order was how they did their business. That was 80% of their business. Records the first few years were not made of vinyl, they were made of shellac, and they broke. Over half the orders in the first 3 years broke. Wow. So they lost money for a while. But it was this chip on Ernest Tubb's shoulder that, by God, and meanwhile, he had gone to Billboard and the bigwigs there, and got the name on the chart officially switched from hillbilly music to country music, country and western. He's the reason we call it country, which is a pretty fascinating thing. So he was a great champion for our music, for country.
Yeah.
And he, not single-handedly, but largely changed the perception of country music records. And that shop is the world's first country music shop. Then his Midnight Jamboree shows were the after party for the Opry. And so the night Elvis Presley got kicked off and booed off stage at the Ryman, Ernest Tubb met him at the stage door, said, "Why don't you walk down a couple blocks with me, come play my show?" And he did, and he was given a warm reception. And when Ernest Tubb heard Loretta Lynn for the first time on the Opry, he said, "You are a star. I want to help you become a star." She started playing that Midnight Jamboree. Yeah. It was the same as someone today catching a buzz and getting a deal. Like he did that on that stage.
Right.
And Willie Nelson and Charlie Pride and everybody and their mama, they've all played that show. And it's the second longest running radio show to the Opry only. And I got to know the folks there and the guy that owns the Ernest Tubb record shop and talked him into letting us do those shows. And so my idea was to bring a bunch of guests and sort of recreate that spirit. And the goal was to shine a light on that place. Because if you'd been in there a couple years ago, the racks were empty and we're struggling.
Yeah.
And we somehow managed to get all these people to come, but it was because they love music and they fell in love with the story of the place. And the star of that whole thing, to me, was the shop. Mm-hmm. And so I'm grateful that everybody came together. And if I had known it was going to be such a deal, a press thing, and if I had tried to make it that, it would have fallen flat. Like people can see through that sort of thing. But I think everybody could tell it was this genuine thing, this genuine love for all of us. And everybody had a blast playing that stage, even in 120-degree heat.
Yeah. It was really hot, wasn't it?
It was hot.
Packed.
It was a sweat lodge.
I saw you, I think, the following Monday.
Yeah.
I think you were returning some stuff to Fender.
That's right.
And, man, you looked like a zombie. Like, I was worried I was going to have to, like, take you to the emergency room or something.
Well, so after the second night, that Friday night, it was 120 degrees, and it was packed. And police had to come on horseback and get people off the sidewalk in front. And it was dangerous. So the third night we moved. But none of us slept Friday night because we didn't know where we were going to have it. We just knew we couldn't have it in the shop again. And I didn't sleep Friday night. And then Saturday night when it was done, and the last 3 nights I jammed with Vince Gill, Brothers Osborne, Eric Church, Kid Rock, Hunter Hayes, like all these, Margot Price, like Brent Cobb, all these people that I love and that I look up to. And so I was too excited to sleep, and I went to bed about 5, and then I had my fan club thing at about 10 that morning. And so by Monday I'd maybe slept a few hours, but I was spent.
Yeah. Is that doing something like that, like putting on some sort of event, is that something you probably see yourself doing more in the future?
Absolutely. I'm this July 2017 I'm playing every Monday at the Basement East, and we're raising money for my 501c3. It's the Follow Your Heart Arts program, and so far we've given 2 semesters of guitar lessons to 12 kids in my hometown.
Man, that's amazing.
Well, it's thanks to the CMA. They awarded us a grant to get started, and so we're raising money to be able to do more work. And I just enjoy hometown gigs here in Nashville, and I love being able to take advantage of all the crazy talent in this town.
Yeah.
And I love also the challenge of learning new music. So this residency, we're having a bluegrass night, we're having a John Marathon, we're having all these different nights of different music. None of them are my stuff. It's all stuff I love to play and want to get better at. And so I get more out of stuff like this than anyone because I get better as a player. I get to reconnect with people I love to make music with, which makes me a better player too. Yeah. And now my hometown charity thing is going to benefit as well. So I see myself always doing residencies and always finding, my next target here in town is the Station Inn. I think they're okay now, but for a while everybody was worried it might go away, and that place has every bit of history that the Ryman has, to me anyway. Yeah. And it's one of the best rooms in the world to hear acoustic music. And so maybe we can figure out a way to shine a light on that place too.
Yeah. All right, let's wrap it up here. Give me some of your Deserted Island albums. It doesn't have to be like just a few albums that you would take with you anywhere.
Yeah. Revolver, the Beatles, Modern Sounds and Country, Ray Charles, Paul Simon, Graceland, The Key, Vince Gill. Ooh, man. Just about anything that had been recorded at Muscle Shoals.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or Stax.
Yeah. Is there a movie or a TV show that you've been thinking about lately?
I swore off of Netflix for a minute, but I bit the bullet and went back in to binge watch the new season of House of Cards.
Okay.
And I'm always watching Mad Men. I think I'm on my 4th time through watching all seasons. I've gotten at least 2 song ideas out of that show.
Yeah. Such a good show.
It's good.
Yeah, it is. Give me an album or a band that you listen to that would probably surprise most people.
Oh. People will be surprised that I am a big fan of, what's the song? Next to It. Childish Gambino. Is that it?
Yeah. Yeah.
I love a
dude
lot
is
of
so clever.
yes,
Yeah.
great lyric writing.
Yeah.
And I need to check out the new Kendrick Lamar. That one that he dropped out of nowhere with the untitled tracks. I mean, and seeing him on the Grammys blows my mind.
Yeah.
And in a way, it's super foreign to me, and in a way it isn't, because the craft work that goes into the lyrics is pretty advanced. I mean, you really got to be pretty stellar to pull that stuff off and it be legit.
Yeah, yeah. Well, man, I think that about wraps it up, Charlie.
Okay.
Dude, thank you so much.
My pleasure, man. This is a blast.
Yeah.
And Peg has been chill.
I know. Peggy Sue just hanging on the couch.
Yeah.
What a good girl.
Yeah, man. She had nothing to do with that blanket, man.
Thanks so much, man.
Thank you.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4. I sleep better with crickets singing, windows open and doors ain't even locked. Southern by the grace of God.
See what I mean, folks? Just a good-hearted, fun-natured dude. I mean, he probably laughed out loud more than anyone I've ever talked to. And what a great storyteller. His dad and all his friends moving the altar and all the holy artifacts to put on a rock show. I mean, it's hilarious. And that story about the Ernest Tubb record shop, it's so interesting. And yes, Taylor Swift, if you're listening, show us some Twitter love, Instagram love, something. We'll take it. Okay, that pretty much wraps it up for episode 2 of Maker's Mic. We'd like to thank our guest today, Charlie Worsham. To find out more about Charlie, like tour dates, the latest news, be sure to visit charlieworsham.com. And while you're there, please be sure to check out the link to his Follow Your Heart Scholarship Fund. And please make a donation to this wonderful worthy cause. Every little bit helps. Also, if you want to watch Charlie demo his acoustic guitar skills, go to lrbags.com, click on the video link, and click on Charlie Worsham and LR Bags. And last but not least, if you like what you hear, please make sure to subscribe and share it with your friends and family. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you next time on Maker's Mic.
Southern by the grace of God. I'm telling y'all, this Delta drawl has stuck to me like buzz on a honeybee. Country is as country does, and look here, cuz you can't out-country me.